I asked 100 top fantasy football managers for their Euro fantasy team so we could find out who the best and most popular picks are. Welcome to FPL Mate, my name is Dan. It's time to get some last minute fantasy football tips from the experts. Okay, so if you've been around this channel a little while, you may have an idea of how this is going to work. But if you are new around here, first of all, make sure you do subscribe if you love the high quality fantasy football videos. We'll be bringing them to you throughout the Euros. But what we've got here is 100 top fantasy football managers. And I asked them all to send them their drafts, their teams for Euro Fantasy. And we've gone through all of the data, manually entering it in to a spreadsheet, which, by the way, has taken 2 days, guys, to put this all together, creating some graphics and some information, put up the statistics together, just to give you some good information and see what's up and who are the best picks. Guys, you're going to love this video. Make sure you do drop a like if you do. So first of all, looking through the data, we found that the top 10 picks were as follows. Starting off, yes, you were expecting to see Mbappe as the #1 pick. You would be very much wrong, because among the experts, it's actually Mittelstat who is the top fantasy pick, considering he is in 99% of teams. That is an enormous number. Trying to get this many fantasy football managers to agree on something is no mean feat. So, Mittelstat at just 4 million, the nailed-on left back for Germany, an attacking player playing at home in a very easy group for Germany as well, is a no-brainer pick for your fantasy team, which is why we see him at 99%. There's not really too much debate to be had here that he's a phenomenal pick that you absolutely should have in your team. In second place, we've got Mbappe, 11 million forward, 93% selected by our experts. So most people agreeing that indeed you do need to have the French striker in your team. In third place, Bruno Fernandes, a midfield pick here. He's at 91% selected, which is, again, really high. Anything above 90%, and you pretty much have to look at these players and say, they're essential. I absolutely must put them in my Euro Fantasy team, and hopefully you guys are going to agree with that one as well. But outside of that, we've got plenty of other popular picks. DeMarco at 87%. We've got Lukaku, a striker from Belgium, 83% there. So yeah, maybe a little bit higher than you expected, because Kane, the 11 million forward, is at 79%. So actually, Lukaku more popular than Kane when we're looking at these numbers. It's quite crazy that Lukaku is a player only sort of selected by around 15% of the overall player base. But looking at the experts, 83% is an enormous number in comparison there. So definitely something to be aware of, and could be a way to differentiate yourself between the more casual players who aren't so keen on Lukaku and the experts who seem to love him. Kane, of course, after that, face another 4 million defender from Belgium. Lunin is the top goalkeeper pick from Ukraine, 4.5 million. 50% selected. Another 50% man, Jorginho, here at 5 million in midfield. Very nice bargain pick for your teams. And Florian Wirtz, if you're going for a Germany attacker, Wirtz seems to be the way forward. So we've got this information. We know who the top picks are, but we need to go position by position, looking at the different price ranges. What kind of players do you want to pick in each position, as well as which hidden gems do our experts have for us? And they do have a few very interesting hidden gems, which we're going to cover towards the end of the video, and also which players to avoid, which players do our experts not like. Let's start off in goal. That's a sensible place to start, and as we know, Lunin at 50% is in half of the expert teams at time of recording. After that, Verbruggen not too far behind here at 48% selected. Of course, you can have 2 goalkeepers in your team, but it seems pretty likely that one of Lunin or Verbruggen is going to be one of them. After that, we've got our 5 million men, Costa and Pickford, with some significant interest in the two. And after that, what we mainly see is a lot of budget picks and a lot of lower selected picks, where there seems to be much more debates as to who you should go for. Moldovan is the top 4 million goalkeeper pick. He plays for Romania and is expected to start for them. After that, Turkey, Bayındır, a little bit riskier there. I actually like for the 4 million goalkeepers, Pence and Stanek. Maybe not having such good fixtures in Matchday 1, but actually they do look very likely to start for their teams despite their very cheap price tag. So yes, we've got some very nice top picks here. Lunin, Verbruggen, Costa, and Pickford are going to make up the big main goalkeepers for your team. And maybe you can complement that with someone a little bit cheaper for your bench and rotate those two goalkeepers as and when. Of course, guys, make sure you do put the player who plays first in the match day on your starting 11, and the goalkeeper who plays later on in the match day, put them on your bench ready to substitute on if your first goalkeeper doesn't perform as expected. If you want to know more about that, guys, do check out the how to play video on this YouTube channel. You're going to learn all about the way substitution works and the way captains work in Euro Fantasy. It's a little bit different to Fantasy Premier League. Looking at defenders, we've got the fantasy legend Mittelstadt. I think we are going to be remembering his name for a little while as fantasy football nerds. He is already a cult hero among us fantasy football managers. So, as we know, he is top 99% insane. And it seems like him, DeMarco, and Face make up the main defenders that our experts are picking. As long as you've got these three in your team, your defense is probably going to look pretty solid as it is. Of course, you have two more defender slots. Who are you going to go for? Seems to be a little bit more debate among our experts. In fourth place, we have Hernandez. He's 37% selected, and Cancelo at 32% selected. So two premium, slightly more expensive defenders for you to go for in your team. Outside of that, Mark Gahey is the top 4.5 million defender to go for. Trent is there as well if you're happy to spend a little bit more money on a defender from England. Jonathan Tah from Germany, another 4.5 million defender to consider. And then we've got a few Netherlands players. Van Dijk, Dumfries, and Frimpong, all between 19 and 12% selected by our experts. Add Verbruggen to that as well, and you can start to see that most of our experts are picking at least one Netherlands defensive asset for their Euro Fantasy team. Of course, we know they face Poland, who are going to be lacking Lewandowski for their first game. So a real nice opportunity for the Netherlands defense to try and grab something from that. Seems like the experts think so anyway. And there's plenty of other players on this list as well, but we are going to cover some of the more differential hidden gem picks later on in the video. Guys, if you want to pause the video or take a screenshot to have a look through this list in full, that's absolutely fine. Feel free to do that as we go through the video. Okay, midfield is definitely where things get the most interesting among our experts, because this is where the big debate seems to be, with not really too much agreement outside of the big pick, Bruno Fernandes. Bruno, 91% selected, means that he's pretty much a lock in your team. You should definitely be having a player like this. And when we see players above 80% selected by our experts, it's probably a good sign that you pretty much need to have them in your team if you want to have a strong team for Euro Fantasy. But as you can see, outside of Bruno, there is nobody above 50%. The big one here, Jorginho, 50% selected. Now, I do have my personal doubts around Jorginho and how effective he can be as a Euro Fantasy asset. At this point, I am not convinced he is going to be on penalties. It is about 50-50 whether he's going to be on penalties or not, because Chiesa and Scamacca could also be on penalties. And Jorginho's ball recovery numbers weren't so good during qualifying. So just be aware of that one if you are going for him. But at the end of the day, he's 5 million. It's really, really cheap. And therefore, you know, if you don't get very much from him, well, so be it. That's what you get from those cheap assets. But there's definitely some more interesting picks in here. Florian Wirtz at 48% is definitely interesting, as is Szoboszlai at 43% and Gundogan at 38%. So these are going to be the top mid-price kind of picks for you. Saka comes in 6th at 31% selected, followed by Rodri at 6.5. Trossard and De Bruyne, the Belgium duo, coming in 8th and 9th, 22% and 16% selected between those two guys. And after that, we see some players who are, I think, quite interesting. Likes of Shaqiri, Canaloglu, Gula. Definitely really nice, interesting, differential kind of players that you could be going for your team. Definitely our experts seem to like these players to a degree. But as you can see, there are so many different options here that all are showing trends and patterns among expert teams that are all being selected. There is no right answer. If you're picking your midfield from the players on this list, then you're probably doing a pretty good job. Now, for me personally, I'm not really feeling any of the midfielders that are not on this list. So I would say, from my advice to you, looking at this list you see in front of you, try and pick 5 midfielders from the players you see in front of you, and one of them should be Bruno Fernandes. But outside of that, go crazy, because there's a lot of really nice options there. Let's move on to forwards. Okay, now we've got a picture of Mbappe on screen. You know, he is the most popular fantasy football asset in Euro Fantasy this year in terms of the overall player base. And our experts do seem to agree that he is a top pick, but it's maybe not as unanimous as you thought it would be. 93% surprised me a little bit. I did expect to see him closer to 100%, but it's still a crazy number. So Mbappe, pretty much essential for your Euro Fantasy teams. You would have to be very, very brave to bet against him. Our experts agreed that he is a top pick. But after that, Lukaku and Kane. I think it's super interesting that our experts prefer Lukaku to Kane. If you are to go for someone outside of these top 3, the top template 3, because really, looking through this list, our experts are pretty much in agreement that, you know, your forward line should look like Mbappe, Lukaku, and Kane. Should have those 3 players in it, because after that, the drop-off to Ronaldo in 4th is all the way down to 13%, which is a lot lower. Of course, that is still viable. 13% is still a decent trend, as is Havertz on 12%. But if you are to remove one of the main 3 forwards, the template 3 forwards, then actually maybe it should be Harry Kane. And Harry Kane maybe should be the player sacrificed in order to go for a slightly different forward. So yes, Ronaldo and Havertz are definitely the most popular alternative forwards to go for Euro Fantasy. But there's still a little bit of love for the likes of Dovbyk, a little bit for Depay, not too much really elsewhere, however. Okay, so this is another really interesting page that I kind of put together for you guys today. And what it shows is some of the hidden gems that our 100 experts have come up with in their teams. And what we've done is we've ordered them here by how popular they are among experts, but we've also included on screen how many people in the overall player base are selecting these players. So, for example, Mark Gahey, who is top of this list, 4.5 million England defender who should be nailed on, is only selected by 2% of the overall player base. And considering that actually 28% of our experts are picking him, what that shows us is that the overall player base of Euro Fantasy is overlooking this player. They are not giving enough love to this player, and you can see that our experts can see more. They can understand more, and they understand that this pick is a real hidden gem that could be a real difference maker in your team. We've got in second place here Shaqiri, 3% selected among the overall player base. However, he is in 15% of expert teams. So if you're looking for that slightly different midfield pick, that your friends in your mini league who aren't really doing their research, they will not be picking Shaqiri, but you can, and you can follow the expert trends and pick this differential player. Moldovan is another goalkeeper here who are 2% overall selected. That's basically nothing. 14% of our experts going for him. After that, De Kuiper, a player who you probably hadn't heard of until fairly recently. The only reason I'd heard of him is because he has quite high potential on FIFA, on FC24. So I've had him in career modes on that game before. But 4.5 million defender, looks to be reasonably nailed on for the first few games of the Euros due to injuries in other positions. We spoke about him a little bit in my team selection video. Of course, he is in my Euro Fantasy team. So I do think he's a very, very good pick, and he's only selected by 1% of the overall player base. However, 8% of our experts have recognized his potential. Højbjerg, 2% selected overall, 7% by experts. Gulaxi, 2% overall, 6% by experts. Christensen is a player who is selected by 0% or less than 1% of the overall player base and 5% of our experts. He will be a fairly advanced fullback, left back for Denmark, who have a good opening fixture. So that could be interesting. If you're looking for an alternative to Jorginho, Serin from Slovenia put together actually a decent amount of goals and assists during qualifying, much more than Jorginho actually. So he could be a nice pick. He's a set piece taker as well. So definitely an interesting one. 1% selected overall, 5% among experts. Sudakov, another 1% selected overall, 5% by experts. I think he is definitely a player worth considering. 6.5 million, plays for Ukraine, nice opening fixture, very advanced player with a great record for Ukraine as well that is being overlooked by a lot of people. And Cambiasso, a 4 million right wing back for Italy, who is expected that he could indeed start the opening fixture against Albania. So a 4 million defender that plays for Italy, that could be a really, really nice pick indeed. And this is something I always love to do on these 100 expert videos. And basically, it's having a look and seeing which players are very, very popular among the overall player base. And actually, our experts don't really like them at all. And I call these players traps. Players that are perhaps overhyped by the general player base, when actually those who know what they're doing are not so keen on these players. So they are potentially going to trap a lot of people out there who are not putting too much thought into the game. Now, bear in mind, guys, I'm not saying that these players are just bad. All I'm saying is our experts aren't picking them. They could very well work out in the end, but there is probably going to be a reason why they're not very popular among experts, especially in comparison to the overall player base. Bellingham, for example, in his defense, he is selected by 7% of experts, which is nothing to ignore. That is still some experts picking him. But to see him selected by 41% of the overall player base, which actually makes him the third most popular fantasy pick in the Euro Fantasy game, well, it's too much. It's a little bit too much. So maybe you need to be a little bit more cautious if you are picking a Bellingham, for example. There's lots of other players on this list who our experts pretty much really don't like. Rudiger, for example, 32% selected overall. Just one person in our experts selected Rudiger. The basic answer is there is far cheaper ways into the Germany defense. Why spend 5.5 million on Rudiger when you can spend 4 million on Mittelstadt, 4.5 on Tap? There's not really too much difference between those players. In fact, you could argue that the other players could even be better than Rudiger, and you get them for a cheaper price. So definitely something to consider. Magnon, 1% selected, so no one's interested in Magnon, really. No one, literally no one going for Donnarumma or Neuer. These 6 million goalkeepers being shown no love whatsoever. Everyone looking to go cheap on a pretty low value position really in Euro Fantasy. Goalkeepers are not going to score you too many points, so there's no point spending too much money on them, particularly when there are alternatives in defense that could do better. Why go for Donnarumma at 6 million when you could go for DeMarco at 5 million, for example? Same situation with Neuer. Why go for him at 6 million when you can go for Ta or Mittelstadt at 4.5 4 million. After that, Guardiola, opening fixture against Spain, puts off a lot of people. He is selected by 15% overall, but just 1% of our experts because they simply do not like that Spain fixture. I imagine as we go to Matchday 2, Guardiola will be a lot more popular. However, Diaz at 6 million, just overpriced. No one's interested in him. Modric, again, we've got this difficulty with the opening fixture against Spain. Not very popular among experts. No one's going for Kyle Walker at 5.5. He doesn't offer really any attacking threat. His ball recovery numbers are not that good. Doesn't really get man of the match ever for England. So, therefore, no point in going for him. There's better options in the England defence for a cheaper price, once again. And Liao, another pick here. 9% selected overall. None of our experts are going for them. Of course, there are loads of other players that the overall player base seems to be picking, but our experts don't like so much. But you guys probably, from watching this video, have kind of identified which players are good and which players are bad, because if you see one of your players in one of the lists that we showed today, then you're probably going to think, okay, our experts like them, I like them, they're probably a good pick. There's definitely going to be players to pick outside of the lists we showed today, but you have to just recognize that you are taking a risk if you are betting against people who really do know what they're doing. And that's fine to do that for one or two players, but if you are seeing very few of your players in the lists we've seen today, then you might be in a little bit of trouble for match day 1. But there we go, guys. If you enjoyed this one, make sure you do drop a like. Do subscribe if you are new around here. We are going to be dropping one more video before the deadline, and then we're going to be doing a stream in the hours building up to the deadline where we're going to be answering all of your questions live. But if you have any questions about your team or anything else, make sure you do drop them in the comments. Do like, do subscribe if you've been appreciating the Euro Fantasy content, because we're going to be back for some more. And until then, thank you so much for watching once again, and I will see you later, mates. Bye bye.